This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so now we officially start. As I said before, you will see our slides, you will hear our audio, but you will be muted. So please use the chat function for questions, and in the end of the seminar, we will have a Q&A. I will read your questions, and the experts, either the law firm or the accounting firm, will answer them, okay? So to start, I will make a brief presentation about what we do here at the Swiss Business Hub. So our mission is to help Swiss small and medium-sized companies, mainly here in the Brazilian market. Basically, our office is based in São Paulo, and we are a local representation of Switzerland Global Enterprise, which is the Swiss official agency for export promotion and investment promotion. And as we are mandated by the Swiss Confederation for doing these activities, we are located at the Swiss Consulate in São Paulo. So each year we support more than 100 Swiss companies in the Brazilian market with basic questions and basic consultation. I and my team, we also go to Switzerland 4 times a year in order to talk to the Swiss companies where they are in Switzerland. So we have what we call country consulting weeks. And in terms of mandated projects, we have around 30 to 40 mandated projects or paid projects per year for the Brazilian market. Those who are familiar with our organization know that we have a huge network in our markets. That's also true for Brazil, and that's why we are happy to have Küster Machado and BPC-Partners with us today. But we also conduct other services besides the networking. So we do market research, we can search for local partners, we can help with intercultural issues, and actually more and more we have been providing customized services to our clients. So anything that a Swiss company needs in the Brazilian market, we can provide ourselves or with our experts. And now coming to the topic of this presentation, I would like to state some reasons why we see that Swiss companies are deciding to open their subsidiaries in Brazil. And when we talk about subsidiaries, it doesn't have to be a very big structure with a huge team. We are not talking right now about industrialization of products in Brazil, but it's really like a representation office. One of the main reasons why Swiss companies are opening their subsidiaries here is the possibility to have a full-time general manager and a sales team dedicated to the Swiss company. Also, the goal is to have more control over the operation. Also in terms of strategy and market, so that you don't rely only on your distribution partner. Another reason, and this is important also in terms of logistics and in terms of taxes, is the possibility to perform direct imports. So instead of a distributor importing your goods and then reselling them to your end clients, with your own offices here in Brazil, you can import directly and sell to your clients. So you cut the middleman, let's put it like that. There is also the chance of being closer to end clients and opinion leaders. We know that Swiss companies, they compete in the Brazilian market not by price, but mainly by quality. So it's very important to be really close to clients, to provide very fast solution, customized solutions for them, and also to contact opinion leaders. And also to having an office in Brazil sends a positive message to the Brazilian market and to your clients. It's a message of a long-term commitment. So comparing to maybe other foreign companies in Brazil, like American companies, for example, that are here in the market when the market is good and then they leave, and they don't have a distributor anymore for some reason. This is not seen as a good sign by Brazilian companies, by Brazilian clients. So having your own office here and showing that you are ready to commit to the market, despite the fluctuations that we all know that happen in Brazil, it's very important. But when we talk about opening a subsidiary in Brazil, we know that this is not for everyone. We receive many requests from Swiss companies. Some of them, they don't have any experience in the Brazilian market. They don't have any partner in the Brazilian market. So for companies with zero experience in Brazil, maybe the subsidiary is not the ideal first step, because it takes some know-how about the Brazilian market, I must say. That's why we suggest a step-by-step approach. So we see that most of the companies opening offices in Brazil, they already have some kind of activity here. Usually they export their goods or they sell their services through a distributor or an agent in Brazil, and then the opening of the subsidiary is a next step. Sorry, just had a small delay here with my slide. But now going deeper into why I see that many companies are moving from the model of having only a distributor in Brazil to having their own offices here. So working with a distributor, as I said before, it's the preferred entry mode of Swiss SMEs in Brazil, because it has a relatively low investment of resources. When I say resources, I mean not only money, but also of time, because you have someone else taking care of the market for you. You can rely on partners that already count with a local network and the know-how to do business here in Brazil. And it's a plug-and-play option. However, it's necessary to adapt expectations. Why? Because when we talk to Swiss companies searching for partners in Brazil, their expectations are very high. So we see that the Swiss companies usually want that the distributor will represent only few brands, like 2 or 3 brands in the Brazilian market, and that their team will be able to focus in their products. They believe that the local distributor will take care of marketing and will invest on your brand here. They believe that the distributor will be proactive towards new opportunities, because the distributor is representing a high quality Swiss product. So they believe that it's only logical that the distributor will be keen to promote your products in the Brazilian market. And usually they believe that the distributor will cover all segments and all regions in which the Swiss company operates in the Brazilian market. However, these are expectations. When we see the reality, and more now that Brazil is a more open country to foreign trade, we see that the distributors, most of them, they represent several brands. And that's also true because the economic situation of the Brazilian market is not quite easy. So in order for a distributor to survive, he has to work with more than 2 or 3 brands. The distributor will require financial support from the Swiss headquarters to perform marketing activities. And if they don't require your support, probably they won't do the marketing efforts necessary to really tackle the market. Then we see that most distributors have difficulties with Swiss niche products. So because of the high price and because usually we are talking about technical sales, so they rather concentrate in products with higher margin and volume. And most distributors will be specialized in one segment and in specific areas of the country. So what we see is that many Swiss companies that started their work here in the Brazilian market with a distributor, and now they want to grow in volume, they want to grow in sales, etc. They see the opening of a subsidiary as a way to overcome these challenges with the distributor and to have a more intensive presence in the Brazilian market. But then you're probably thinking, but opening a company in Brazil, it's very complicated. I would love to, but I'm afraid I can't. And this is not true. Actually, the trick is to get support from experts who know the reality of the Brazilian market and who also know the reality of foreign companies entering the Brazilian market, so they know the challenges that you face. And experts who will, let's say, translate all these challenges to you and make it easier for you. So that's why we invited for this webinar 2 of our experts. One is Küster Machado, a law firm, and the other is BPC-Partners, accounting firm. They are used to working with foreign SMEs entering the Brazilian market. And it's also good for you to know that you can always count on the Swiss Business Hub coordination. So even if you are working with our experts, but you want the Swiss Business Hub to be your main point of contact, this is also something that we can do. But I don't want to disappoint you. I must say that opening a company in Brazil might be a bit more complicated if you are in a regulated sector. Okay, so that's why I'm putting here some logos of technical agencies in Brazil. And if you are from one of these sectors, you know these agencies very well. The experts won't cover this topic here because our idea is to give a general presentation about the Brazilian market, but just be aware that if you are opening a subsidiary in Brazil and you have a regulated product or service with Anatel, with Anvisa, with the Ministry of Agriculture, etc., it's important to check the requirements for opening a subsidiary in Brazil, specifically also with those agencies, because usually you have more steps to do, let's say, to open a subsidiary. And I know that the companies in these situations know well that it's a bit more complex. So you will have my contacts. Don't worry, you don't have to take notes because we will send you the presentation later. And now I will pass the word to the experts from Küster Machado. They will start the presentation. And later on, we will have BPC-Partners, and shortly we will have the Q&A.
Thank you, Letícia. Good morning. And I was invited in order to present some legal frameworks for corporate purposes in order to regarding actually foreign investments in Brazil. So, as Letícia told us earlier, the first step for every company is to find a local partner, mainly a distributor, and as a further step to incorporate a subsidiary. This incorporation of a subsidiary has to be properly projected because you will be practicing kind of direct imports between related parties. So this will trigger some effect on transfers pricing, for example, and also on legislation regarding profit shifting from Switzerland to Brazil or from Brazil to Switzerland. So what we are going to focus on is in corporate aspects on this, because later today we will have the advice of BPC for accountancy and taxation. So some legal requirements to found a subsidiary in Brazil. We have legal forms, legal requirements, and the demand for a director and an administrator, which needs to be a permanent resident in Brazil. So many companies hire someone in Brazil, and many other they send their own managers to Brazil through a director visa. And then at the end of our presentation, we will talk a little about financing the company. So, just a minute. Okay, so in order to choose your corporate framework, we have in Brazil three main natures of entities that you are able to apply to. If you see in the right side of the screen, you will see limited liability companies, corporations, and individual limited liability companies. So this, for limited liability companies, is the most common framework that we have in Brazil. It has a minimum of 2 shareholders, but the main aspect of this corporate structure is there is no obligation of a minimum capital. So companies are able to incorporate the subsidiary with low capital and then perform capital increases that are very simple and easy to do in our framework. Corporations are a little more complex for Brazilian, from a Brazilian standpoint, because companies has to publish their financials every year. They have a higher compliance level, so they are not as applied as the limited liability, which are the most common. And the third nature is a levy, which is an individual limited liability company. This form is kind of new for Brazil. It started in 2012, and it allows a single shareholder. Okay, this is the only corporate nature that has a minimum capital stock of 100 minimum wages. This nowadays, 100 minimum wages would be something around 90,000 Brazilian reais. So all of foreign shareholders that apply for the incorporation of an entity in Brazil, they shall appoint an individual to be their proxy in Brazil. This individual has to be a permanent resident, and this proxy will be the one who is going to sign the articles of incorporation of each company. So all of foreign investors must be represented by a local. In this slide, we bring an example of a power of attorney. Usually, this power of attorney is performed by a lawyer, and the main reason for this is because there are some minimal legal requirements within the powers of this proxy. Just as an example, the proxy has to be entitled to perform many of bureaucratic steps for public registration among fiscal authorities, tax authorities from the federal government, state government, in many cases municipal governments, and this attorney, in fact, has to be entitled to represent the foreign shareholder in every aspect of its corporate existence. So in further steps arising from the execution of the Articles of Association, this document is private, but it is subject to public registration, and it has some minimal requirements such as capital share statement, corporate activities, and headquarters. This further step for public registration among federal, state, and municipality authorities, they are very, very bureaucratic in Brazil, but it's mainly paperwork. At this step, later on, we will show a flow of registration for you to have some better idea on how these procedures must take place. Once the registration, the public registration is completed at step number 5 in the slide, the company will be able to open a bank account in Brazil. So usually bank accounts in Brazil takes longer than the company itself. This is because private banks have a joint responsibility to perform some policies about know your client and also to prevent money laundering schemes. So banks, most of them are very, very conservative when they are filing for the opening of an account. And our main tip on this is to have some contacts before or during the public registration with any bank that you are interested in opening, because this could take even longer than the company itself. So from this year on, also, and this is the last step for registration, there's a new legislation that are complying individuals and companies to appoint the final beneficiary of corporate structures. This is a new set of rules that comply all taxpayers and corporations to appoint who is the one who's going to be the last beneficiary of profits, and also who owns control on these corporations, and they have some agenda of principles to define this beneficiary. But as a general rule, a final beneficiary is the one who has significant influence with a minimum interest of 25% of shares. So in Brazil, this 25% of the capital stock, of the capital shares, actually is because the shareholder that holds 1/4 of these votes in assembly, this guy would be entitled to veto rights. So this is why significant influence is with a minimum interest of 25. This would be veto rights. Once the account is duly opened, the foreign shareholder is going to be able to perform the invest itself. This is made through a deposit on the Brazilian company's account. And from this deposit and from the financial capacity of the company, the Brazilian tax authority will issue an import license. This is very important for all of those companies that need to import in Brazil, for example, their stocks. So these import licenses are named Radar in Brazil, and the main challenge in this chapter is to show the fiscal authority a minimum capacity for payment of taxes. And we have 3 categories of these licenses, which are express, limited, and unlimited. And the values, the financial capacity that is to be shown is how much taxes the company is able to pay in dollars during a 6-month period. So if the company shows the capacity to import and pay for taxes on $50,000 within a 6-month period, the category would be express. If the company shows a capacity between 50 and 150,000 US dollars, the import license would be limited to these amounts. And if the company shows a capacity superior to 150K, the license will be unlimited. So the financial capacities to be shown to the tax authority, the companies are able to show through different ways of financing. The main characteristic is, or the main number to show is how much capital stock the company holds in Brazil. But we have many cases in the past that we were able to raise the limits through loan agreements or through credit. So equity is not the only path to increase the capacity of importation of the company. Regarding administration, we told before that the company has to be administrated by a local or a Brazilian resident. So in case you hire a Brazilian manager, this is not applicable, but in case that you are willing to send a foreign administrator, you have to apply for visa. And Brazil issue actually 4 types of visa for businesses purposes. You can do it through the investor as an individual with a minimum investment of 500,000 reais. The company is also able to send a foreign manager through a manager visa with a minimum investment of 600,000 reais. But also the company can send employees. This employee has to be at the Brazilian entity's payroll, not foreign, and also as a service provider with a non-related company in order to perform some technical services, for example, or so on. So these investments, and mainly for visas purposes, they have to be registered within the Brazilian Central Bank, which is in the right side of the screen. This RDE is meant to be, in Portuguese, direct investment registration, which is performed through a system of the Central Bank, and this will be the proof of a minimum investment for the issuance of visas. There are some other licenses that depend mainly on the activities of each company. So, but these other licenses, Letícia told you before, which are on regulated sectors. And at last, I brought a time frame for incorporation, just for you to know the step by step. So. This frame is estimated only. We have a high cost of bureaucracy in Brazil. This is one of our challenges. And so between the articles of incorporation, that would be the first step of the Brazilian entity, and the end of these registration purposes, we are able to incorporate the company in mostly or almost 170 days, but it will depend mainly on the city of the headquarters, the state of the headquarters, and also on the activities. If you have a high regulated activity, this will take a little longer. So this is what we brought for a very brief information about incorporation of companies, and if you have any doubt on this subject, please hit the Q&As in the chat function, and we will be glad to answer you.
Okay, so here you have the contacts of Küster Machado. As I said, I will send you later the presentations. And now I will open BPC-Partners presentation, which is the accounting firm. But they will take the opportunity to discuss also some general costs of opening an office in Brazil.
Okay, my name is Arnaud Bleuez. I am mainly French and partially Belgium. This explains my accent. I've been living in Brazil for 9 years. I am qualified accountant in UK and in Brazil, and partner of BPC-Partners. BPC-Partners is specialized in foreign companies based in Brazil, and we do legal representation and outsourcing mainly. So in 20 minutes maximum, I will talk about taxes in Brazil. 4 chapters: main taxes on turnover, corporate taxes, taxes on exporting to Brazil, and finally a case informing about the main cost if you decide to have a local company in Brazil. Main taxes on turnover. You probably know that Brazil is a federation, so the organization of taxes depends a lot on the organization of the states of the Federation of Brazil. So these taxes are classified between the responsibilities of each level. The main tax for municipalities is the ISS. So this is a tax on services. You must know that Brazil is divided in municipalities. It's about 6,000 municipalities all over Brazil. So wherever you are in Brazil, you are in one of these municipalities. The tax for ISS is between 2 and 5%. It depends on the municipality, and it can depend also on the type of services. This is a decision of the municipality. For state level, the main tax is ICMS. This is the tax on commerce. So you have 27 states in Brazil. Each state can decide the tax of ICMS. It depends also on the product. So in São Paulo, the rate is 18%. In Rio, the rate is 20%. In other states of Brazil, it's normally between 12 and 18%. Finally, federal taxes. The main federal taxes, of course, these are the main taxes. It's about 65 taxes in Brazil for corporations. So obviously, these are the key taxes. So for federal level, you have the PIS and the COFINS. The base of calculation is quite the same. So when we speak about PIS, we normally speak also about COFINS. You have 2 different rates for both taxes, 0.65 or 1.65 for PIS, 3 or 7.6 for COFINS. This will depend on the tax regime you decide for corporate tax. We will see this in another slide. About tax on industrial products, the IPI, it goes from 0 to 45%. This will depend on the type of product you are selling in Brazil. To find the correct level of tax, this will depend on, you need to consult a special table. You need to pay attention to the calculation of tax in Brazil. Okay? I have seen European companies making some mistakes when calculating the tax in Brazil. In Brazil, most of taxes, not all of them, but most of taxes are calculated por dentro. So the best thing to explain is with an example. In Europe, let's say you have a price net of tax of 100 and you apply 20% of VAT, the gross amount is 120. But this is different in Brazil. In Brazil, if the gross amount is 120, and if you apply a 20% tax, the net amount is not 100. The net amount, as you can see in the slide, is 96. This is because we apply the tax not on the net amount, but on the gross amount. So in this case, the impact is 4%, and obviously 4% of net margin is a huge impact. It can make a difference between a profit and a loss. So when you talk business with Brazilian people, pay attention, because here in Brazil, we talk gross, we don't talk about net amount. Another point that needs your attention is withholding taxes. I understand that in Europe we have withholding taxes mainly for income tax. In Brazil, it's not just for income tax, it's for corporate taxes as well. So many taxes in Brazil are withheld. This is for, as I said, income tax, but also sometimes for ISS, and for fees, COFIES, corporate taxes. So it means impact is when you, since there are withholding taxes on corporate tax, it means that you will record a credit of corporate tax in your statement, in your financial statement, despite the fact that you are not making a profit. So this will have an impact, a cash impact, when you do operations here in Brazil. Now we're going to see the second chapter about corporate tax. You have two options in Brazil. You have regime real and regime presumido. So the real regime is a kind of natural method. It should not be a surprise for you. This is a logical calculation, meaning that you take income minus expense, and you get your results. Of course, there are some non-deductible expenses, non-taxable income, and you have a tax result. If your result is a loss, you don't pay corporate tax. If your result is a profit, you apply the corporate tax. It is 34%. It is a total of 25 and 9%. So this is quite an easy and natural method of calculation. Regime presumido, with this regime, this is only possible if your local company in Brazil has a gross income below 78 million reais per year. So it's quite significant. Normally, most of companies can decide between presumido and real. In this case, the tax authorities will assume that you are making a profit of 8% if you are an industry or commercial companies of your turnover, or 32% if you are selling services in Brazil. So let's say you are selling 100,000 reais of services in Brazil, we will assume that your net profit is 32,000 reais, and we will apply the corporate tax, so these 34% on these 32,000 reais of profit. This is régime présumido. Exporting to Brazil, this is one single slide with a case and some calculations, so quite many calculations in these documents. We start with the FOB, free on board price, insurance, and then we move to import tax. Double I, imposto de importação. In this case, okay, the 9% is just an example. The amount of tax on importations will depend very much about the local production of your product. If your product you are exporting to Brazil is making a competition with Brazilian producers, normally the government will apply higher rates. And the government of Brazil have kind of protectionist policy, so they want to protect their local industries. If there is a local industry making your product, they might increase this rate of import tax. There is a table where you can consult the amount of import tax. So this is it depends on a code, the NCM code. Once you know the NCM code of the product you are planning to sell to Brazil, you can find the amount of import tax. After import tax, you can see we will apply IPI, ICMS, PIS and COFINS. What is important to see is that for IPI and for ICMS, the base of calculation is not just the CIF price. It does contain the import tax. It does contain also IPI and PIS, COFINS for ICMS. So if you look at the last line of this slide, you can see that when we add up the tax rates of all those taxes, we have 53.95%, but the global tax rate is above this amount, because you can see that the FOB price was 100,000 and we end up with 168,000. So we multiply taxes and we end up with a global tax of over 68%. Quite a tricky calculation, and a total of 68, while it seems to be 53% of taxes.
No, just a question here, maybe advancing a question. Part of these taxes paid at importing into Brazil can be later recovered, right?
Exactly, you can record these taxes in the credit. So you record this in the assets. Import tax you cannot, but other taxes, yes, you record in the assets in credit taxes.
Mm-hmm. So the main problem of all the local taxes that you are paying at importation is a huge cash outflow when you import goods into Brazil, but some of the taxes apart from the import tax you can recover back.
Exactly, you can recover back, but of course you can recover back when you sell, and sometimes you don't sell enough to use all the credits you have in the assets. This is quite a big topic here in Brazil. Mm-hmm. Last chapter is about cost in Brazil. If you decide to open a local company here in Brazil. Of course, these are estimates because it depends on many conditions, type of activity, and also we give like some numbers here about staff, but of course the salary of the staff you're going to employ will depend a lot about the experience, the qualifications, the history of the staff. Assuming the activity is an activity of services with 2 staff, with 1 million reais turnover per year, these are some estimates of the cost. So the cost for opening the company is between 10 and 20,000 reais. And the following costs are monthly costs. If you need a virtual address, it's about 300 reais per month. If you want a small physical address in São Paulo, you can find something reasonable for 3,000 reais. The legal representation of shareholders, it's about 300 to 500 reais. And finally, if you need a non-operational CEO, it's about 2,000 to 3,000 reais. Of course, if you have an expat, the expat, once he has a visa, will be the CEO, he will be an operational CEO as well. But outsourcing, so bookkeeping, taxes, payroll, this is about 2,000 reais. Of course, you can ask extra services if you want your staff to concentrate on business and commercial issues. So you can ask the accountant to do the invoicing, to prepare payments, and to send a management report in English. And this is about 1,500 reais. And last slide is about payroll. So general manager, the operational manager of your company, depending on his experience, on his skills, it's about 12 to 20,000 reais. You might need an employee to help. Again, it's a big bracket between 2,000 and 10,000 reais. For your information, the minimum salary in Brazil will normally be a bit over 1,000 reais as from January the 1st next year. But social charges, it depends on the salary, but it's about 60%. And you will need to pay some benefits like voucher transport, voucher lunch, and health insurance. Last point is funding. Many European companies have a local company in Brazil that is helping the head office to sell to the final clients. In such case, since the local company in Brazil doesn't sell but is helping the head office to sell, it means it's a cost center. And to provide financing, one typical way is that the local company will issue an invoice, can be a monthly invoice, a quarterly invoice, to the head office. If you do use this way of financing your local company, you need to be aware that your local company will pay ISS and will pay corporate tax. There's no peace and coffees on exportations. It's only ISS and corporate tax, your choice, meaning that it will depend on regime, real or trésorier. And this was the last slide about costs for setting up, for managing a legal company here in Brazil. I think now it's time to move to the next part of this webinar.
Yes. Well, thank you for both of the experts for your great presentation. I saw in the chat that I was making some noise in the keyboard when I was typing, and I couldn't mute myself, so I apologize for the noise. And if I didn't answer your question, that's the reason why. But now we will close here the presentation and start the Q&A. So I will give you some time to think about the questions that you have, and then we can start the last session of the webinar. Just for you to know, in case that you make a question that we are not able to answer here, I will retransmit the questions to the experts, so we can also see how to answer them via email or etc. We are also available to organize a separate conference call if you want to move further with the topic, and if you are already in a stage where you know that you want to open a subsidiary and you want to see more details than what we presented here, this is also something that we can do. So let me see if we received new questions. Not yet. People are still shy. I received one question in private, and I will read because maybe it's the question of other people. The question was if we will send the presentations later to you. Yes, we will send. And if the recording of the webinar goes well, we can also send the video so that you can watch it later with our explanations. Okay, so now we are starting to receive questions. I will answer them in the order that they appear. Okay, so first question, did you say a native is required to set up a business, or did you say just a local person, in example, a foreigner?
Actually, the criteria for this is not nationality, but residence. So companies and investors need two people, one to be representing the foreign investor, and another to be representing the Brazilian entity as manager. So, but the criteria is actually residency and not nationality.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, I received another comment saying that the presentation was quite clear. Thank you for the compliment, but I don't believe that you don't have any questions about opening an office in Brazil after all the information. Another question that I received in private was if it's necessary to have minimum of 2 shareholders.
Well, in this case, for limited liability companies and for corporations, a minimum of 2 shareholders is mandatory. And these companies has not a minimum capital. So if you want to incorporate with a lower cost, you have to provide 2 shareholders. For individual limited liability company, which is ideally, there's the possibility of having only 1 shareholder, but the minimum capital is kind of high for pre-operational purposes. So we have to invest around 100,000. Next year, the minimum wage would be 8,000. And the minimum investment for an individual company is 100 minimum wages. So this could raise a little your costs for pre-operational phases.
Mm-hmm. So one new question that we received now about accounting is the following. When we shortly discussed the possibility of recovering back some of the taxes paid at the importation, someone asked, because they heard that there is a difference between lucro real and lucro presumido in order to recover back these taxes. So the question now is to BPC-Partners.
Yeah, about PIS eco-fees, as I said, there are 2 different rates. For PIS, you have like 0.65% or 1.65%. Actually, this depends on the corporate tax regime you decide. If you decide to have a regime real, the tax will be higher, so you will pay 1.75%. And if you decide to have regime presumido, you will pay 0.65% of PIS. But if you select regime real, this PIS tax will be just like a VAT tax, meaning that you can compensate with PIS paid on your costs. So the tax is higher, but you can compensate just like VAT in Switzerland. And same thing for PIS. So for PIS, it's bigger, it's 3% or 7.6%. So if you are a regime real, you pay higher tax, but you can compensate just like VAT in Switzerland. So the calculation is, you need to take this into consideration to decide whether the regime real is the best for you or whether regime presumido is the best for you. You also need to know that you can change every year. November, December is the perfect time. Normally the budget is done. You have the key numbers for 2019, and based on turnover, expected profits, you can make some calculation and decide whether you will apply real or presumido for the next year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Arnaud. Now I received a question from Fabio Speciale, my colleague from Zurich, to Küster Machado. He asked regarding final beneficiary. If foreign investor company is an SA, and is controlled by one or more funds, for example, control higher than 25%, where final beneficiaries are not known, can a Swiss mother company do? Can it still open a bank account?
Yes. Well, this new legislation on final beneficiary, it provides with some limits for this. So in case of funds and also in case of open companies which have capital stock in the exchange market, these beneficiaries are not known, and it would be an exception to the general rule.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now another question from Mrs. Sara Egli. What is a typical don't when opening a subsidiary? What practices should be avoided? I think this question relates to both of the experts. So who wants to start?
Typical what you should not do.
Yes, what you should not do.
I have seen companies, European companies, eager to start doing business in Brazil, and they decide to send money to the soon-to-be administrator before having a local company in Brazil. And after a couple of months, they open the company in Brazil, and they said, okay, the money we sent to Carlos, can we put this into capital social of a local company? This is very, very difficult to do, if not impossible. So the best is first to open a local company, then open a bank account, and then you can pay capital social.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You will need to prove that the money goes from Switzerland to Brazil to record the capital social. So you cannot send the money to Carlos and then ask Carlos to pay this money to the capital social of the local company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in the same line, mainly the anxiety to start businesses in Brazil is triggering many of those problems in the future. Unfortunately, the incorporation of a subsidiary in Brazil could be a little bureaucratic. So for the first year of these procedures, you have just to be patient. And the same example of sending money to the administrator could be also when they also send, for example, loans for pre-operational expenses, and these loans then are not stated in they have no accountability, because the company doesn't exist at the moment of these flows. So mainly, if I have to do a don't, to say one thing not to do, is don't be anxious, just be patient.
Okay. So I think we covered some don'ts, but if there is any other specific point you wish to cover, Sara, let us know. Yes, Rafael, please complement.
I have another many times also. Investors find people to be at the same time proxy of the shareholders and also administrator. This is not recommendable, because the administrator is going to be the one to represent the Brazilian entity among the market. And most of times, these people is more focused in sales, marketing, budget, and so on. And the proxy is the one to represent the shareholder as an investor within the company. So in many times we get to different interests from the shareholder if compared with the operation. So for the same person to be a part of both roles, I don't think this is recommendable in the future.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Now another question. When a Swiss company wants to open their offices in Brazil, but they are not sure where to open the offices, in what city, in what location. So what points would you suggest that this company considers in order to open the subsidiary?
It has a lot it is related mainly with the kind of human resources that you need, also with the market that you're willing to target. You can choose to be close to the client, or you can choose to make, for example, if you are planning to incorporate a little industry, you have to be close to your inputs and materials. In many cases, companies compare tax costs between one state to another, or for services between one municipality to another. But I guess that this is more strategic than law. So, but what I see from our clients is that whether they go close to the client or they go close to the sources of materials or human sources that they need to perform activities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, one question, and this is actually a good question because I already received from other clients regarding the shareholders of the subsidiary here in Brazil. Can it be a company as well, or only a person?
Our legislation allows both individuals and corporations to hold interests in Brazil. So this is no problem. The main difference between these two options is the documents that an individual shareholder might, they are different from a corporate shareholder. So for corporations, what we need here is a proof of existence, which would be the articles of incorporation mainly, and also a proof of signatory rights. So who signs for the company? This is mainly stated through minutes of shareholders' meetings or elections of officers. And for individual investors, this is more simple actually, just with a copy of the passport would be enough to start with the incorporation. So many clients choose at the beginning to incorporate the company through an individual investor, and then to perform an amendment of the articles of incorporation to assign the shares to a company. But this is more related to time frames.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, so let me see. Sorry, someone else is typing. Another question here that we received in private, maybe it's the last one. How is the taxation of dividends in Brazil?
Okay, there are some conventions fiscales with many countries in Europe, and Switzerland has signed a convention fiscale. So there are no taxes on dividend sent to Switzerland. So once you have paid a corporate tax, you don't have to pay taxes on dividend.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this raised me another question, but now I will ask to my director, Philippe, who is also here with us. Because there was a double taxation agreement signed between Brazil and Switzerland. So what impact will it have on companies with offices here in Brazil? And when do you think that it will be active?
So this agreement was signed this year in May, and that was a big step forward that we made. Now the agreement has to be approved by both parliaments in Switzerland and in Brazil. In Switzerland, it will be approved at the beginning of 2019 at the session in spring session. And in Brazil, that's a question mark. We don't know exactly if it will be a priority of the next government to send this agreement to the parliament. Our ambassador is working on that, and we hope to have in the next month this agreement will be also approved by the Brazilian parliament. But it's still very difficult to say if it will be a priority of the new government really to sign this agreement with the parliament or not. We hope so.
But when signed by the new Brazilian government, this will have a very big impact for companies operating here, right?
Of course, because it will bring more clarity on both aspects of taxation if you have a company here and headquartered in Switzerland. So it's really based on the standard of the OCDE, this agreement, but that's something that we were missing for improving business between both countries. And now we have this instrument, and we just hope that this instrument is now coming in force so that both companies can benefit from that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So now time is over. I thank all of the participants for being with us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Also, thank you to the experts. Thank you to my boss, Philippe. And I think that our expert Arnaud has one last word.
Yes. If you want some more information about Brazilian taxes, on our website you can find our book is online. We have a book in English on Brazilian taxes online on our website. Feel free to go and consult.
Good. Thank you. I will share the link with the participants. Okay. Thank you all.